Hey everyone, Grandmaster Ben Feingold here. We're going to start a new series of videos. This is video number 4 of the 30 or so in a row I'm going to make every day. We're going to do the Sinquefield Cup if I could find an interesting game. Otherwise, we could look at another tournament, I guess. A lot of tournaments going on. So, the game of the tournament so far, I think, is the Anand Fabiano Caruana game from yesterday. And I said yesterday I was going to do it, so let's do it. Anand was white. He's 47 like me, and I think Fabi's 24. I'm within a year, so you can't complain too much. Unless I'm not within a year. That's also possible. Seems like I should be within a year. Okay, but anyway, Anand played c4, explosive, and Fabi played e5, and they played this pretty common line, g3. I thought I got rid of the notes, but I guess I didn't. Okay, and this is a very common line here. And this position, Fabi played bishop c5, which is really unusual. Normally they play knight b6 because the knight on d5 is, getting attacked a lot. And usually the bishop goes to e7 because bishop c5 sets up a lot of potential forks and attacks, and the bishop has to waste time. Normally in the Dragon Sicilian, when somebody's doing this, well, first of all, they have an extra tempo because this is like a reverse Sicilian. And second of all, they're castling queenside normally in the Dragon variation where they play bishop c4, in this case bishop c5. But black's castling kingside here. So bishop c5 is a little weird, but it's okay. It develops a piece. Sometimes we want to play, we have this knight takes e5 option sometimes, with the fork on d4. So black has to watch out for that. Okay, and he could do it now, but he castled. Castles. Now d3. Yeah. And bishop b6. So normally the bishop goes to b6 pretty early when you play bishop c5 in any kind of position like this, because you're trying to avoid knight a4, knight e4, rook c1, knight takes e5. There's all kinds of reasons why you don't want your bishop on c5. A bishop on b6 is defended twice. You could argue it's defended 3 times because the queen on d is also x-ray defending it. And just a very safe move. Okay, so white played bishop to d2, a normal developing move. If he plays knight takes e5 with the idea of a discovery on the knight, then we play knight c3, knight c6, knight d1, knight d8. And, if black just took back on d8 and white took on d1, white's up a pawn. But black can play knight f2, and now black is just winning. Material's equal, and the knight on d8 is trapped, and I don't even know what white would do here. Probably rook takes f2 and be down in exchange. Okay, well, you would never go into this. So he played bishop to d2, very Anand-like move. And bishop g4, according to a website that I read, bishop g4 is the novelty. It develops a piece. And I saw a variation given, I think it was Robert Hess, but I'm not sure. It was like knight c3, bishop c3, f6. But of course, Fabiano never plays f6 until he shouldn't. Okay, bishop g4, normal move. Rook c1. Again, there's these knight takes e5 variations, but I don't think they ever work. Okay, knight c3. And this is a really good time, I think, to take on c3 because white was probably getting serious about playing knight e4, knight a4, and going to c5 now that his rook is on c1. And, well, if white takes with the pawn or the bishop, he's blocking his rook. So I think after rook c1 is a really good time to take. Bishop takes, rook e8 defending the pawn. And you really don't want to play f6, not just because of my rule, but if you want to play e4 with black, or you want to play f5 and then e4, f6 doesn't help any of that. So rook e8 makes a lot more sense. Okay, Anand played b4. Queen d6, defending the pawn again. Makes sense. Knight to d2. Yeah, there's a little trick here. If you play h3, I can take the knight. And now, when you play h3, you're undefending the g3 pawn. And you could be thinking, so what? Well, this pawn's is also not defending it either because of this pin. So there's a variation like e4, where you're attacking the bishop and you're discovered attacking the g3 pawn. So you got to watch it. Chess is tough. So h3 is very weakening. It weakens the dark squares. It weakens the white king. So Anand didn't do that. He played knight to d2. Very typical English kind of move. White wants to redirect the knight to a better square, especially with the queen on d6. So, makes a lot of sense. It also opens up the bishop on g2. So, yeah. And in my opinion, it's just my opinion, this is a really important game for Fabi because if he wins the game, he's going to be either in first or tied for first. And there's also a chance he'll be the highest rated player in the world on the live rating list. Somebody pointed out that if Fabi won this game and Magnus lost to Wesley So, and Magnus was black, that Fabi would overtake Magnus for the #1 rated player in the world in the live ratings. So Anand usually isn't winning a lot of games the last year or two. He doesn't lose a lot of games either. So he probably thought Anand is somebody he can beat, and thought Wesley with white had chances to beat Magnus. And at some point in that game, Magnus was much worse. I think 3 moves later he was winning. Anyway, so I think instead of playing like boring theoretical 20 moves of theory, I think Fabi wanted to get an interesting game where both sides had chances to win, and he figured he could outplay Anand in that kind of position. So that's why it's sort of an unusual variation for black. Okay, he played queen h6. Obviously, the black queen doesn't want to be on d6 because white's going to play knight e4 and knight c4. And black wants to play rook d8, very reminiscent of my game with Cremissi, which I did a video on yesterday. I wanted my rook and my opponent's queen on, well, it was d8 and d1. I didn't get to do that because my opponent traded queens first. But here, if black can play rook a d8 and then play e4, he can get some action going. And I think it's a good idea to have the queen on the knight, and also maybe bishop h3 is a possibility. So that makes a lot of sense. There's another trick in the position too, which didn't happen, but it's allowed because the queen's on h6, and I'll explain that later. Okay, so knight c4 makes sense. Queen h5 threatens the pawn on e2. And here Anand thought a long time, and one of the reasons he didn't play rook e1, which is probably the best move, is it weakens the f2 square, and now the king can get overworked. And you could see some positions where black is sacking on f2, and then black is taking on h2, and white's king can get in trouble. So probably black would at some point, I don't know about now, maybe now, play rook e6 with the idea of rook f6, putting pressure on f2, rook h6, putting pressure on h2. And probably, if it was black's move here, bishop takes f2 check would work, because after king takes, queen takes h2, it's very hard to stop rook f6 check. And Anand was talking about that after the game, that he was really worried about this. So he left f2 defended and played this sort of awkward rook c2. You don't want to play rook c2, but okay, defends e2. And rook a d8. And again, I mean, if black gets to play e4, all of his pieces are crashing down on Anand's position. And sort of a little joke they've been making this tournament, the super GMs, that is, bishops are better than knights, and maybe Nakamura doesn't agree. The other GMs all agree. So we got to take those bishops. So knight takes bishop, takes back. You can take either way. I think the computer slightly prefers the way Fabi played because there's less pressure on the c7 pawn if it's not there. Makes sense. And f3, never play f3, but I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and f3 gets rid of the pressure. So in the long run, white has good prospects because black has the double pawns on the queen side, and white has the 2 bishops. But in the short run, it looks very strange to block your bishop on g2. So, of course, Anand rectified that pretty quickly. After the bishop moved, he played queen to d2. Makes sense. And b5 was played, which black was critical, that Fabi was critical of this move afterwards because it just seems like a nothing move. It doesn't do anything. It just sort of a pass. And the problem with this move is later in the game, white was able, they didn't even talk about this, but white was able to use the c5 square, which was very important. So with the pawn on b6, obviously white can't go to c5 ever. I don't know, Fabio was saying he could play h6, giving himself some lift, protecting g5. f6 is a move, but never do that. Okay, and Anand played f4. I mean, if you leave your pawn on f3 the whole game, it's not good. So you want to play f4, you activate your bishop on g2, you activate your rook on f1, and you make the dark squared bishop. And this is very important. I tell this to all my students. When you have two bishops and your opponent doesn't, one of your bishops doesn't have a counterpart, in this case the dark squared bishop, and that's where your advantage lies. Black doesn't really have a good defense of the dark squares, so we have to play f4, just normal move. Okay. And Fabi played bishop g4, which is a bad move. I think bishop h3 is the best move. And this is, again, sometimes the live commentary doesn't really explain the story. And I tell this to my private students also. When you guys at home lose, it's because you don't see anything and you miss everything and you blunder and you forget stuff and your flag falls and you're just no good. When top players lose, I mean really top, like these guys, they actually see everything, and they miss one move. So if they look at 130 moves of variations every move, probably Kasparov and Fischer did that. If you miss one move, you could make a losing move. So by looking at variation after variation after variation, if you miss one move, that like ruins everything. Sometimes it doesn't ruin everything. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but in this case it did. And when Fabi played bishop g4, he missed like a very important move that happened later in the game. I mean, if that move didn't happen, bishop g4 would be fine. So it was just based, and again, when they do the live commentary and they're like, oh, this is a bad move, the computer says so. Well, that's because the computer sees 12 moves ahead. So it sees why that's a bad move, and Fabi just missed something. And if he had seen what Anand could do, he wouldn't have done this. So it's sort of unlucky. Okay, and Anand took the knight on c6 because now the e-pawn isn't sufficiently defended. So we get rid of the defender, and then we take it. Yay, we're up a pawn. Okay, and now, Black can play down a pawn, but that wasn't, he didn't give a pawn away on purpose. His idea was to play f6, which is not a good move, obviously. It's f6, and, well, if he can take the pawn on e5, then he's doing fine. And Fabi simply missed after takes on f6, takes on e2, f7 check, king goes to f8, bishop takes g7 check, king takes, queen check. And he saw this when he played bishop g4, and this was his analysis, and he just miscalculated or didn't realize after takes, rook e8. So either he didn't see rook e8 or he thought rook e8 wasn't good or something. But, I mean, well, we're threatening f8 equals queen. We're threatening rook takes d8. And this isn't dead lost, but it's not even clear that it's lost. They were sort of arguing whether it was losing or not. You can throw this check in and take on. In fact, rook f2 might be better. And then take, and then queen, take. And this is very lucky that Black can do this because it looks like this is just a winning skewer, but the king attacks the rook on e8, so you can't quite win right away. And Anand thought this might just be a draw, and Fabi thought probably white was winning, but it's really difficult, and who knows. And Anand was explaining if the black bishop goes to d5, how's black going to lose? Position's great. So anyway, I guess sometimes white wins, sometimes it's a draw. And this is what should have happened. And Anand was sure that would happen. And, well, Fabi thought this was just good for black. He didn't see rook e8 when he played bishop g4. So he thought queen e5 was great. Of course, now he saw, after bishop takes g7 check, let's go back. Yeah, now he saw rook e8, and he actually thought about playing king e7 here, which the computer does not like. Okay, so that's what should happen, and I don't know what would have happened if he played queen e5. Probably I wouldn't be making a video on this game, because even if white won, it would have been like a long, boring endgame. So I probably would have shown you something else. Okay, and so it was funny during the commentary with Jennifer, Maurice, and Yasser. They were wondering what was wrong with Rook E5. The computer was, saying white's winning, raw, but they really couldn't find the move as to why. And they looked at a lot of different moves. And all of a sudden, I was looking, and it came to me that the move here that wins is I found the winning move, and I typed it in the chat. And then a few minutes later, the analyst found it, and Fabi just didn't see it. I mean, Fabi was expecting white to play h3 here, which is very interesting, and that's why he didn't see this move. If white doesn't play h3, if h3 is not legal, probably Fabi would have found this, because he would have been like, what's going on? But he assumed that Anand was going to play h3, and he thought h3 was good, so he thought this was better than playing queen e5, and they were both good for white, but this was messier. He just didn't see the next move. So pause your video if you haven't seen this yet. You should have seen this by now. It's a very famous game, even though it's only 24 hours old. If you haven't seen it, that's good, or if you forgot, then pause your video and try to find the winning move for white. And not only is this winning, it's super winning. It's like plus $1 million. So I found it after about a minute when I was watching the game, and it's queen d4. And, well, the problem is the rook on d8 is, defending f8. So you don't want to let the guy queen would check, which you're stopping. But now your rook is hanging, your rook is pinned, and the main idea is actually quite funny. You want to play the move rook c5, which, as I said earlier, is only possible because black played b5 earlier. And after rook c5, you're all pinned and tortured. Yeah. And after queen d4, there's no move for black. You have to save your rook on d8. You can't let him play f8 queen. You can't let him play rook c5. So you're just finished. And the rook on e5 is pinned. Okay, so Fabi played queen g5, which defends his rook on d8. And then rook c5. There's no defense to the rook on e5. So he took the queen. And he queened. He made the only legal move. And then after check, he resigned. The only legal move is king h6. And that's the end of that. And black loses everything. So after queen f7, he resigned. Very nice win for Anand. He saw a lot of variations, and he saw that bishop g4 was bad, then f6 was bad. He had it all calculated, and it was correct. And Fabi missed rook e8 in the variation that he should have gone into, and he missed queen d4. So he missed basically two pretty important moves, and Anand didn't really miss anything. So Anand won. It was very tactical. And Anand, when he was Fabi's age, he was really good at tactics, and he still is, just not as good. And he plays more of a positional boring style now. But when it comes to it, when you're 27, 80, you can still play pretty good chess. Anand hasn't lost a game yet. He has 4 draws and a win. Very impressive in this field at the age of 47. So maybe Kasparov has something to look forward to. Although Anand plays chess all the time, and Kasparov hasn't played a 2800 player in 12 years in a slow game. So I'm still not quite confident Kasparov's going to do very well in the rapid and blitz. But I think he would do okay if he had not stopped playing, because at 54 he'd probably come in 3rd or 4th. But I mean, he hasn't played chess in forever, so yeah. Anyway, I didn't get my check yet from the Aloha tournament. I've complained, but I guess sometimes you don't get your check. If I do get the check, then maybe McGregor could win. Maybe I was wrong. What's more likely? I receive my prize money or McGregor wins? Time will tell. It's about 0% for both. Okay, so that's okay. I think in the Sinquefield Cup, Mr. Sinquefield will pay the prizes. So I think these players are sitting pretty, and they deserve prizes. Look how great chess they play. Maybe I don't deserve anything. Maybe that's why I didn't get paid. The truth hurts. Okay, so like and subscribe here on YouTube. This is YouTube, right? Yeah. And follow me, when I'm walking around. Follow me to the mailbox and see if my check is there. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come to the website, donate, enter our tournaments, come to our grand opening on September 9th. It's from noon to 6. It's in Roswell, Georgia. pretty close to where you live. I don't care where you live. Yeah, and everything's great. And tomorrow, I'll show another game from the Sinquefield Cup. I'm not sure which one yet. Maybe one from tomorrow. They had a rest day today, as you know. And I'll see you guys later. Bye, everyone.